Who am I? Who are we? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? Do I matter? The list goes on. These are very familiar questions that we hear today in different forms, in different quarters. Identity crisis. Today we'll be talking about identity crisis. And why identity crisis? Because it's a major challenge in our world today. Everywhere you look, all around you today, you see it show up in different forms. And the funny thing is that it's not restricted to individuals alone. It cuts across every sphere of life. My name is Ernestunde. You're welcome once again to my series titled The Christian Walk. It's a series that shares insight for a very productive Christian walk. Please don't go away. I'll be right back. Let's start with identity. What is identity? The dictionary defines identity as the qualities, the beliefs, personalities, possessions, looks, expression, and several other things that makes a person or a group, or that differentiate a person or a group. From another perspective, we can say what makes you unique, what makes you you, what makes you stand out. Our identity a lot of times gives us a sense of self-worth. I mean, you can easily hear people say, I'm an original African man. This is a form of identity. Oh, professor, doctor, pastor, architect. I mean, the list goes on. Chief, prince. I'm a British citizen. I'm an American citizen. Gunners for life. I mean, these are all forms of identity by which people identify themselves today. What are some of the factors that influences our identity? Many things influence our identity. I mean, ranging from our profession, our religion, our tribe, our relationship, our country, our marital status, our parental status, family background, associations, financial status, physical appearance, your interests. I mean, the list goes on. All this determines our identity, our self-worth. They have a way of influencing how we see ourselves. And it comes to play, well, a lot of times when we introduce ourselves. It also goes a long way in influencing several aspects of our life. Our value system, I mean, our life goals, our ambitions, they all are offshoots of how we see ourselves. Our associations, who we choose to relate with, our choices in general, our vocation, our business, marriage relationship, the kind of person we marry, the kind of people we relate with, how we see ourselves affect all these things. Now let's come home to the identity crisis. What is identity crisis? The dictionary defines identity crisis as a state in which a person experiences uncertainty about who they really are and their proper role in life. He also defines it as a state in which a country, organizations, etc., is subject to disorientation and uncertainty about their true role. Very interesting, isn't it? Like I said, it cuts across every sphere of life and is not restricted to individuals, even countries. Identity crisis is about the most common crisis in our world today. Who am I? What am I here for? Where do I belong to? What do I stand for? Which group or race do I belong to? I mean, those questions race through our minds continuously. And sometimes you're shifting from one end to the other. It is a crisis that goes beyond individuals, like I said. Even countries and organizations experience identity crisis. A typical example is UK, with the issue of Brexit, which basically means British exit, referring to the possibility of Britain withdrawing from the European Union, EU. Now, the honest truth is that most of us, if not all of us, have passed through this challenge at one point in time or the other. Some of us might even be passing through it now. It comes up at different stages in our life. It is not restricted to any age or race or gender. I mean, it can be very subtle. Sometimes an area of, I don't know this. Am I a science student? Am I an art student? I don't know where I belong. And it can be very, very conspicuous sometimes when it comes to some other issues. Like, am I a man? Am I a woman? Gender issues. Am I black? Or am I white? It can be that prominent sometimes. Several things can cause identity crisis. Loss can cause identity crisis. For example, a loss of job. We identify ourselves by our job. So if you lose your job, if you have a very good job, and you lose that job, it used to give you a self-worth, can affect your identity. You don't know how you see yourself anymore. Relationships that we have, loved ones, our families, businesses you own, finances. If you lose your finance, lose your business, all that can affect your identity. Your health, your looks. You had an accident, you lose your leg, you lose your eyes, it can affect your identity. I'm the most handsome person, you used to pride yourself by your looks, and you have an accident and you lose your good looks, or you were married, you lose your marriage. All those things can affect our identity and plunge into a crisis. When you lose these things, that gives you a sense of self-worth. You end up in a place where you don't really know how to see yourself anymore. Sometimes disappointment, marital disappointment. You got married and that's not the person, it turned out to be not the kind of person you want to, or maybe person didn't even show up on the day of wedding. It can affect you. Am I important? Am I worth anything? Changes also. You used to be a well put together, single, cool, calm, collected, and you got married as if you're no longer yourself. Your spouse don't think you know how to do several things. You never measure up. The kids come and you seem flustered. Now you don't even know how to carry on. It's as if it's a world that you can't identify yourself. Again, sometimes incongruent lifestyle. A typical example is a Christian ending up stealing, lying, taking bribes. You say you're a Christian, but your values are in contrast. You're taking bribe, you're lying. You ask yourself, get to a point, am I a Christian? Who am I? Several things all these things could cause identity crisis. What are some of the negative effects? Several negative effects of identity crisis. When you go through this crisis, can lead to depression. When you can't fit in any longer. You lost your job and so you don't seem to have a sense of self-worth again. You can't pay the bills you need to pay. You lost your business, you lost your marriage. And so you can easily fall into depression. You can easily lose your self-worth, your self-confidence when you lose your source of identity. You get into fear and anxiety because of feelings of uncertainty. It can lead to addiction, alcoholism, drugs, pornography. Those are ways people try to get away from their loss and to identify with something. Suicide tendency is an extreme of identity crisis. When you don't know where you belong again, you lose your self-worth, can lead to suicide tendencies. And so several negative effects. And so the point now is, the issue to now look at is, how can we overcome identity crisis if it's such a challenge in our world today? There are several ways of overcoming identity crisis, and you can find several solutions on the internet, on the social media. But I'm looking at the perspective of a Christian. As a Christian, I believe the best way to overcoming the challenge of identity crisis is by stop defining or identifying or valuing ourselves, our self-worth, by temporary things such as our job, our business, our material wealth, our looks, and stuff like that, and start defining, identifying, and valuing ourselves by things that are more permanent in nature. And the only thing that is permanent in nature that I know of is God. And so, best way to identify ourselves is in our relationship with God. Colossians 1:15-7 tells us, so we look at the sun and see the God that cannot be seen. So we look at the sun and see God's original purpose in everything created. For everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, rank after ranks of angels, everything God started in Him and find its purpose in Him. We find our purpose in God. 1 Peter 2:9 tells us, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. And so we find our identity in God, in Christ. And that is an identity that cannot change. that cannot be taken away by any act of nature, whether loss of job, loss of business, loss of relationship, it remains intact. However, it doesn't come easy. Identifying ourselves in our relationship with God doesn't come easy because there are several things that makes it difficult for us to see or define our identity in our relationship with Christ most of the time. And we need to watch out for them. Sometimes it's our worldly desires, our desire for fame or popularity. Sometimes it's out of ignorance. Sometimes it's the pressure of the world, peer pressure to fit in, to belong, to be among. You're scared of standing out. The desire for comfort. All these things come into play to have the good life. As Christians, none of these things is worth trading our identity in Christ for, because they are so uncertain, so temporal. Our relationship with Christ should be the number one source of our identity. He said, a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Nothing can take away our self-worth if it is relationship with Christ. Not even death. Love should define us. Our love for God, our love for people, and not our love for things or love for possession, love for qualification or positions. No. Our love for people, our love for God should define us. You can be a governor, even a president, and it's okay. Enjoy the benefits that comes with it, enjoy the perks, and be proud of your achievement, of what you do. But don't let it be your defining factor, because it is so temporal. It is not permanent. Use your power, use your possessions, and use your positions to help people, to add value to others. Let your love for God and for people define you, not love for possession. Let our love for God be our main source of identification, and let this reflect in our regular interaction with people. Some practicals. Take some time to think through some of the identity crises you've been through in the past, and even some that you may be going through right now. Ask yourself, what was the reason for this identity crisis, or why are you going through it? And if you can, speak to someone, a godly Christian, a mature Christian, that can help you identify the reason for this identity crisis, why you're going through this challenge, and also be able to give you godly perspective to overcoming it. We all need each other. I encourage you to take time to do this. But I tell you, our relationship with God, our identity in God is the best form of identity that we can have, because it cannot be taken. Thank you for spending this time with me. Join me again next week for another value-adding time as we go through another lesson together. But until then, stay blessed, bye, and stay safe. Thank you.